Welcome to Slayer the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Dudes Talking Metal. This is where we get the finest, most knowledgeable dudes out there to get together with you to talk all things heavy metal and hard rock. We've got Tony Dio and Butch with us. Mike
What's
is
up?
going to be dropping in later. We've got, the dudes are busy guys. They've got appointments, they've got to fly to places, interviews, engagements, you know, they've got to make appearances at places and stuff like that. So we've got some dudes coming, some dudes going, but we're starting with Tony and Butch. And the topic for today, Mike will be joining us. We'll be splicing his section in later. So the topic is today is we're calling it hometown heroes that never made it really big. And what we mean by that is that bands that when we were younger that were popular in our hometowns, that if you talk to somebody who's roughly in our age group and grew up in our area, that they're going to know this band, that these bands were popular in our regional areas, but they never really broke out of those areas. Maybe they had a little bite at the apple, maybe they had a moment where they had a chance to break out, but they never did. But I find this fascinating that you'll hear about some band that you've never heard of that nobody knows about, and I'll be watching some YouTube video, and then I'll see in the comments people leaving comments like, "Oh man, I grew up on these guys were huge in my area. Like I remember seeing these guys at the big club, and they were so popular." And yet they never it seems like every area has that band. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. So, Tony, let's start with you. Tony, first of all, tell us where you grew up. I'm pretty sure you're still in that area, right? But
Yeah,
so
so I'm
what's
I'm from
your
North
area?
I'm from North Carolina, and I'm pretty near Raleigh, the Raleigh area. And there's a lot of bands that have come out of Raleigh that had some success. I mean, of course, everybody knows Corrosion and Conformity. It's probably our biggest export there. And there was a band called Cry of Love that had some like major touring, had a major album deal in the early '90s, had a few radio hits and stuff. And of course, there was the band from that started in the '70s from this area called Nantucket. And those guys were on CBS Records and they did tours opening for Kiss and AC/DC and so forth. And that kind of puts me to the band I want to talk about today because the band I'm going to talk about came out of the band Nantucket. That's Nantucket's third album, Long Way to the Top. And
I love those album covers.
yeah,
All those
yeah,
damn
the
lobsters.
the Lobsters, yeah. So two members from the band here that were in the band, Pee Wee Watson, who was the bassist, and the drummer was Kenny Soul. And those two guys splintered off from Nantucket there around 1980, 81 or whatever, and joined up with a guy named Mike Gardner. And they formed the band PKM. That stands for Pee Wee, Kenny, and Mike. I guess they, were
Mhm.
trying to come up with a name. It's just hard to, hey, we'll just call it PKM. It's got a cool ring to it, though, just PKM, but they released an album in 1985, Rock Erotica here. Um, these guys just great band. I've got a 8x10 photo of them on stage here. They were
Wow.
Oh,
definitely
that's
a
cool.
dynamic three-piece band. Just they came out, like I said, it was so it's probably about, I think it was around 83, I think is when actually they really started playing. I'm not sure. So I'm around 13, 14 years old, and they got this song called It Don't Take Much, and it's all over the radio. The song is it don't take much to keep me happy. And one of the lyrics is a warm bed, a hot woman, and a cold beer. It's just a
Can't argue with that.
working class rock and roll song, and it's all over the radio and in this area. The big rock station here at the time was WQDR, I think it was, and they were playing it all the time. That's the station that I listened to, and these guys were always playing. I always heard about them playing around and stuff. Didn't have an album out, They actually headlined they got so big from the radio play of that song that there's an arena out at the state fairgrounds, the Dorton Arena. It holds about 8,000 people, and they sold it out.
Wow.
Wow.
And this is the legend of this band that I'm telling you, because I didn't experience this. I didn't get to go or whatever to see them there. But I always loved it. In 1985, they finally released the Rock Erotica, and I actually bought it on tape. I still have the cassette that I bought back in the day at the local record store, and it actually got reissued. It didn't not really reissued. It was when it came out originally. It was on a label called Blue Collar Records, which was I believe was out of Raleigh, if I'm not mistaken. Here, I had to do some research, but another label called Complete released it with
Yeah.
different cover art. And
Tony, I actually have that. As you were
yeah,
talking, I was like, I think I have that. And I just looked through my Discogs collection here, and yep, I've got that.
yeah, awesome. This was I think this was a Nashville, Tennessee based label here that did it. But yeah, these guys were really in line with what was happening around the 82, 83 period. I guess when they really started writing these songs. They fell in line with stuff you would think about the heavy rock stuff of Billy Squire, Night Ranger, Foreigner, Shooting Star, Streets, stuff like that. But I also heard elements in there of like Huey Lewis and stuff like the Police and stuff like that was kind of mixed in some of the songs. But they were all predominantly kind of just hard rocking songs. And all three of the guys sung and mainly Mike and Kenny would Mike and Pee Wee would do lead vocals. Kenny did a lot of the harmony vocals. They had the 3-part harmonies. Really, really, really good songs. And I know I've heard that they had several labels came down and looked at them. I think somebody from Atlantic looked at them, and he basically said, "Hey, I could have signed you 2 years ago, but when right now, if you're not new wave, we're not looking to sign anybody, basically." And they kind of predated what was the hair metal thing or whatever that came next. They were about a year
Hmm.
too early for that. When the record came out, they were right in the heart of it, but they didn't have a glammy look or anything. They were just, normal looking long haired
Yeah.
dudes playing in a band. And, but I know they opened a lot of shows for some nationals. I know they did a show or two opening for Ozzy. But man, that's like I said, that main song, "It Don't Take Much," was all over the radio. Couldn't get away from it, and they had several other really, really good songs. In the early 2000s, now that they broke up, I guess, in the maybe late 80s. I never got a chance to see them back in their heyday. When they started doing reunions in the mid to late 90s, I actually went to some of the reunion shows. And I got to know Kenny and Pee Wee and all, just running into them places over the years and stuff, and Mike. And they did a show, I think this was 2002. They did a show, and like reissued the record on a CD, remastered. Sounds amazing. They put a couple of songs on it that were from those recording sessions that didn't get released originally. But I thought it was cool that in the liner notes of that CD, it had a bunch of like news clippings. And there is a review in here I really thought was cool. It was a review for the album that was written by a Dave Reynolds. So I'm thinking this may have been the British journalist Dave Reynolds that wrote for Kerrang and Sounds and stuff. So I don't know. This may have been in a European mag, because I know the album kind of made its way over there and stuff. But they had a song called "Give Me a Call," and he said it sounds like Mark Storace singing a Scandal song, like a song by the band Scandal. I was like, it does. That's perfect. That's exactly what it sounds like. Great songs. Unfortunately, Mike passed away a few years ago, and he had Parkinson's, and they did several Mike Gardner benefit shows in this area where when he first was diagnosed with it, he could still get up and play with the band and stuff and all. And then he went downhill over the years, and but he was kind of a hometown hero as well, Mike Gardner. Rest in peace. And most recently, they found all their master tapes, including tons of songs that had never been released, and they released a double album and a double CD called Legacy, and that's out now. And maybe I can give you a link or something you can put in the description if anybody wants to check this band out or order it. But also, definitely want to share a link. There is a YouTube video. If you look up PKM Live, it's a channel called Welcome to Combo Land, and it's a little documentary on the band. It's about 10
Oh,
minutes
wow.
long, and then it's a whole professionally shot concert of them like in 1984. So
Oh,
that's really
cool.
cool. So maybe we can share the link for that.
Yeah.
This would have been a perfect album for a label like Rock Candy to pick up and reissue because it's right in their wheelhouse of what the kind of stuff they release. And I wonder if they even know about it. They probably do. I know there were some talks of them doing the Nantucket albums at one point. So maybe they'll get it'll get out to the world eventually. But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my choice. PKM. Check them out, folks.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah, it's amazing that back then you could have a band in your local area that could play to 800, 1,000 people, at a theater or something. And, nowadays you think about how difficult something like that would be to do. And you would think that, and again, this just sort of reinforces this with these bands, and they're so popular in your area that you're like, oh, these guys are definitely going to be huge because they're so popular in your area. Like I think about there's two bands that come to mind, and one of them went really big, which was Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister obviously went big, but before Twisted Sister released any records, they were this huge band in the tri-state area. And if you read Dee Snider's book, he talks about how they were basically playing like 5, 6 nights a week, packed houses. The highlight of their thing was playing at some amusement park where they had like 10,000 people show up. I mean, they were huge. I mean, it worked out for them. They did get signed and moved on. Another band that I think about with stuff like this is the Tallis, Billy Sheehan's early band. They're supposedly really popular in Buffalo, and you can go see how they did like a Tallis reunion where they played like I don't know some outdoor thing in Buffalo, and there's like thousands of people, and they're one of these bands that in that area they seem to be huge. And Tallis had some success. They were on Relativity. They did some tours, I think, opening for UFO and Van Halen, and they did get out, but they just never really broke super big. There's still a band that I think if Tallis plays a show in Buffalo, they can still have a lot of people show up. If
Oh
Tallis were to
yeah.
play in South Carolina or here
Yeah.
in Florida, probably nobody would show up, right? Or only a
Yeah.
handful of people would show up. So, yeah, that's kind of
They
what
open for
we're, talking about here. These bands that, yeah, they're just immensely popular in a certain pocket, but they just outside of that area, yeah, they just never broke. So
I think they opened for UFO, and UFO took Billy Sheehan for one tour with
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah. All right, Butch, you got somebody?
Yeah, man. Man, it feels like I talk about these guys a lot, but
Now, first, tell us about
yeah,
the area that you're.
well, I was debating what area to use. I mean, but because I grew up in the Lehigh Valley, in Pennsylvania, which is like the Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton area. Um, and I grew up in a small town called Bath. That's kind of was like situated, I
Hmm.
don't know, map wise, but it was like I was like 20 minutes from Allentown, 20 minutes from Bethlehem, or 15 minutes from Bethlehem, and 15 or 20 minutes from Easton. It was kind of like it was this small little town in Northampton County. And you know, overall the area wasn't really known for having bands bust out of it. There were bands that were popular in the area. There were musicians that came out of there. Like there was a band called Magnum
Hmm.
from the area, and Robert Mason, I'm pretty sure, sang for them at one point. But they, Magnum was mostly like a cover band that would mix in a couple of originals. But in the '80s, Now I didn't get to go to, unfortunately, I didn't get to go to like club shows because I was too young. So my experience with a lot of bands from the local bands from the area was that either bands opening up for majors. There was a place called the Airport Music Hall that had like it was like it would have bands like UFO and White Lion, Zebra, um, Testament,
Yeah.
Anthrax, bands like of that, Overkill, TT Quick, Kicks, like those kind of
Yeah.
bands. Play the Ramones used to play there. It was like it was an old bingo hall, I think, and they turned it into like a rock club. Um, I saw a bunch of shows there over the years, and the promoters always use locals to open, unless the bill was like there were a couple times I saw Overkill, and they brought Hades and Mean Streak with them, so there was no room on that bill for. But usually you'd have a band like there were bands like Kraken and Destroyer and
Yeah.
Destroyer had a initially started with a bass player named Chell Benner who briefly joined Quiet Riot at one point. He actually had his own instructional video out too, but from what I understand, he kind of had like stage fright or so. I can't verify that. I didn't know Chell personally or anything like that, but he had left Destroyer. Um, so there was Destroyer. There's a band called Wash that was great. That if you know me,
Yeah.
I've raved about them a zillion times. They were getting pretty popular in the area. But the first local band that I remember that I caught on to that was like really popular and fit right in with what was going on was a band called Tease.
Yep.
Um,
I knew you were going to pick them. Just so everybody knows, I'm going to get to mine where I grew up, but when I got married, I lived in the area that Butch grew up in. But Butch, you had already left, where you were in Pittsburgh at that point. But so I'm familiar with the area that Butch is talking about because I lived there for 15, 16 years. So, but yeah, I kind of guessed that you were gonna pick Tease because
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, and they were pretty much. I mean, they're pretty much the biggest of the. I think
yeah,
they're from Lansdale initially, formed in the early '80s, or something like early to mid early, kind of like that period there. With Luis Rivera, Dave Weekly. Luis Rivera is the singer, Dave Weekly on bass, a guy named Greg Malik on guitar. And then you had Brian and Kevin Stover brothers on guitar and drums. Um, and the band was, they fit in, like musically fit in with what was going on, what was coming up from, between 83 and 85, 86, like the whole glam thing that was going on with, but like heavier, like all the first couple Motley Crue records and Wasp and Black and Blue and um, Big Kiss, bands like that. Like they sound like somewhere across between like if you threw Motley Crue and Kiss and Wasp in a blender and put Geddy Lee, cross with Vince Neil on vocals. Um, they kind of had that kind of vibe, but real like just party rock kind of band, really like loud in terms of how they dressed. Let me show you first. They uh, they put a record out. This was the first version
yeah,
of the record, black and
That's the
white
one
cover. Which, yeah,
yeah,
I mean
I've got that one.
this doesn't do them any favors because you'll see when I show the next version. But I mean, this band was super colorful. This was like they called it their rags look, like they were like all the clothes. It was like all torn up, like layers of like just torn up, fabric and t-shirts and spandex and whatever, like super colorful. And so they were, they had like a good show. Like, you'd go see them. I was lucky enough to see them three times, never with this lineup, unfortunately. I did see them under the name Tease, though. They changed the name around 87 or so. Um, they put this out and it did well enough that this it got ended up getting distributed then by Green World. But
yeah.
this was the label for this is SMC, and you can guess what that stands for, and you'd be exactly right. Uh, I don't want to ruin the. I don't want to throttle the. Well, I can't even think of the word, but anyway, the album got reissued with an extra track on it. And you can see like here, like just the full color, like the yellow, the bright yellow, red, blue, just like all torn up. There's a video out there. I'll get the link of them on some local TV show, lip syncing to their song "Party Hardy," and they were just cool, man. I mean, just and I love this record, which is when local stuff comes up, or like Mike and I were talking about sleaze metal last night. I brought these guys up again. Um, like I love this record. This is not only like a favorite local record for me, but this is like one of my favorite hard rock records of the era. Like it's just killer. Like song after song on here is great. Party Hardy's awesome. Midnight Madness. I mean, this is high energy, straight up like hard rock, melodic metal. When the Moon is Full, On the Run. Like this isn't like super commercial kind of stuff. Like I said, this kind of fits in with those first couple of Crew records and like Kiss. It's like fairly heavy, I think, for the style of music that it is. And they were killer. I don't know if you can't get a good shot of the show. They did the smoke and
Yeah.
all that stuff. They had makeup, with you can see like Dave here kind of got the the makeup, make themselves, he's kind of got like a almost like a Nikki Six kind of vibe going
Mick
on. Really unique
Mars.
on stage.
Yeah.
His presence on stage was unique too. He would kind of like move a little bit sometimes, like do these robotic kind of things and all. But they were killer, a killer live band. Like really had their stuff together. Now there was a falling out in the band over, I think the not so much the musical direction from what I gather, but what the how the band wanted to proceed, and the Stover brothers left. So they got a guy named Rex Eisen, who some of you might know as Trip Eisen. He ended up in Static X, and a drummer named Mike Natalini. And they eventually they started as Tease, but then they eventually changed their name to Rough House. Um, and as Rough House, they ended up getting signed to Columbia Records and put this record out. Now I like this record a good bit, but it was kind of like by the time it came out, we were nearing the tail end of the 80s, and it didn't get a real big push. It did. Um, the Tonight got a little bit of airplay on MTV. I think it was actually made that the Dial MTV countdown
Yeah.
a little bit, but it didn't get a lot of traction. They didn't get great tours um, for the record. They ended up just playing kind of like regionally and locally. Like I don't even know how far from home they ever got. New York maybe, um, but again, like real catchy hard rock. Now this is a little bit more commercial. Like the first song on here, "Don't Go Away," is almost like AOR. And then there's some stuff to fit in with what they were doing on the self-titled Tease record. And then there was stuff that kind of fell was a little bit more rock and roll, maybe fell in more with later 80s Crew, like the more like a little bit more of a 70s vibe, more like a glitter rock kind of thing at times. Not so much. There are a couple tracks on here that still had that kind of like glam metal thing, like Racing is like that. There's a song here called Justify, but most of it's just fun, upbeat hard rock. I mean, they went to like the leather, like a more street kind of look. Again, still great live. I mean, they played well together, really engaging with the crowd. And I was fortunate, like I said, to see them. I saw them at the Roxy in Northampton, which is a movie theater. I always knew it as a movie theater, but there was a venue that back in the 70s, like Rush played, Kiss played there.
Wow. I
Um,
didn't know that.
and I saw two concerts there in the 80s. I saw Tease, and there was a band from Philadelphia called Metal Wolf that were great, like a Dokken kind of sounding band, who also were awesome. They did one record, and well, they did one then as the Wolves too, but that one Down to the Wire record is killer. But they never like made it, and um, I don't know, Tease Roughhouse just never really broke. They had everything I think they needed to do it. Great players. I think especially for a lot of people like look down on the genre, but I thought they were tight musicians. They're tight on stage, like real locked in with it, but fun. Um, definitely like a great live band, real engaging. Luis was a good front man, a good singer. Um, and the songs, I thought the songs were there, especially on the that debut. I think the songs on here are really good too, but I think maybe they were like, trying to, you wanted to try to make it. And So they were like real popular in the area. They played a good bit around there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see them, you know, as an adult yet. They have done over the years. They've done reunions. They have one coming up this month. There was one, John, uh, that them doing their reunion
Hmm.
affected Sinister Realm when you guys were supposed to
Yeah.
play at the Gin Mill in Northampton because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
ended up,
They did a reunion like
so
they've
you
done.
guys ended up getting bumped.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, they play places like that, like the Gin Mill, and I'm not sure where this next show is in November, but I guess they've been playing this record all the way through. They actually reissued this on CD a couple times now. I've seen it. I just got the most recent reissue. It's got a couple bonus tracks on it, like demo tracks that are cool. It's worth picking up. Like I said, if you love stuff like if you like that early to mid '80s like Rat,
Yeah.
Crew, Kiss, Black and like that vibe there before bands started like really kind of like gearing more towards the
Bon
radio.
Jovi before they started turning into Bon
Yeah,
Jovi.
before Bon
Yeah.
Jovi and Whitesnake kind of were
Yeah.
and Def Leppard were all over the airwaves. Like this band is worth checking out, and the record is killer. Yeah, I mean Tease was awesome. I mean, and check them out. These aren't too hard to find. You'll pay a little bit for them. Now, I think this might be getting a vinyl reissue, from what I understand. Um, but these do pop up on Discogs. I don't know that they're this one. This one was released on CD
Yeah.
as well. You can get this on CD as well. It's just that, and you can get it from the band, I believe, or I'm trying to think of the label that put it out. Uh,
I'm looking at
uh,
their Discogs and they must
I
have
think Retrospect
self-released
did
the
it once.
CD.
Retrospected one, and then they did one themselves, and then this latest one is by one of these labels that does. It's on my spinner over here.
You're talking about
Um,
Tease or Rough House?
Tease. The Rough House has
Yeah.
never been reissued. It
Tease was reissued first by them on CD, by it was like a
mhm.
self-release, and then
Yep,
20th Century Music,
that's
Vanity
it.
Music Group.
Yeah, that's the most recent one, and
Yeah.
supposedly they're going to put the vinyl out. And the liner notes in the CD talk about there was a whole full album almost recorded between that first album and the Rough House album. And I posted something on Dave Weekly's page about it. I said, "What are the chances of that getting released?" And it was kind of like, maybe. So it'd be cool. I'd love to hear like some of that material in between. There's a couple of live shows out there you could find audio on YouTube that has a couple songs that maybe aren't on the first album. But anyway, like I keep repeating myself there. Killer. I love Tease, man. I mean, they're one of those bands that you wanted when I was a kid, like 15, 16, 17, 18, in high school. Like these are bands that I not only looked up to the big bands that everyone else did, like the major bands, but these local bands. Like I wanted to be these bands like that. Like I so badly wanted to be involved in the local scene, and I was just a little too young, a little too fat, and didn't have the voice that
You weren't the legend that
I
you
wasn't
you've
the
now become.
the the near Yeah, it would have been. I was like so jealous in some ways of like you'd see some of these dudes out and about like in their. I remember JJ from Wash worked at there was a music store in Whitehall. Maybe I don't know if it was
Right.
Stephen Nicholas or but he'd walk in, he'd be working, and I'd be like awestruck, like
Yeah.
that dudes you knew that were in these bands, or like Brian Wolf from Destroyer, the bass player, worked at the listening booth
Yeah.
at the mall, like selling, slinging records and stuff, or Tony Mancina from the Blisters, and these guys that you'd see them out in public, and for me, it was like seeing like a rock star because I was so like I'm like those dudes you'd see them playing on opening for bands. Like, oh, that would be so. I can't imagine how cool it would be to
Yeah.
do that. So yeah, they were like super inspirational to me. A lot of those bands.
Nice. I figured that that's who you were going to pick. So,
I was
like
gonna
I
go. I was
mentioned,
thought about doing Dream Death, but I didn't grow up in Pittsburgh,
yeah,
so I went with. I had to go with the Tease would have been the most obvious one. Washed was the other one.
yeah. So, as I mentioned, I lived in the area that Butch grew up in, but that wasn't until I got married. But I grew up in a town called actually a small town called Mountaintop, but it was close to the Wilkes-Barre Scranton area. And Wilkes-Barre in Scranton is about an hour north of where Butch grew up, and it's about 2 hours north of Philadelphia. And it's kind of funny because 60 miles apart from each other, but completely different scenes. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with you guys had the airport music hall. We had nothing like that. There was no mid-sized venue that up and coming bands could play at. So in my area, it was pretty much dominated by cover bands.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but there were a few bands that mixed covers and originals, and one of those bands was called Harpo. Do you guys recognize that name,
I
Harpo?
definitely recognize the
I've
name
heard,
because
yeah.
they would come down to they played the music hall from time to
Right.
time, so I could picture the logo in my head
Yeah.
right now.
So I do have their first two records on vinyl, but I've got some of my records in storage due to some work we're doing here at the house. So I'll splice in pictures of the album covers here. So they were a band that they put out a 12-inch five song record in 1981. The band sort of centered around the keyboard player, lead vocalist John Kistner, and he played guitar and lead vocals on the records. Bill Kerstetter, but when I saw them live, at least by the time I started seeing them live in the early '90s, he was playing bass with them. So they were one of these bands that they were sort of kicking around, I think, since like the mid 70s, sort of mid to late 70s. It was very hard to find any information on these guys. I maybe should have reached out to some friends from back there that maybe could have given me some more info on them. But so the first EP, 12-inch EP, it's a little more, it's kind of hard rock, but you hear a little bit of like kind of keyboards and little synthy
Mm.
sticks, like at times. Reminds me of Angel a little bit at times too. So sort of that, it's still got like kind of a 70s sound to it. But by the time they got to their 1987, their second record, which was called Armed to Deliver, which just had this red cover with the logo on it. I'll splice in a picture of that album here. They were more hard rock, like kind of an AC/DC, maybe Kicks a little bit. Where was Kicks from? Was Kicks from Maryland?
Baltimore
Yeah,
area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like
that's the cover right there.
Hagerstown.
It's looking pink
Hagerstown. Yeah.
on Butch's phone, but it's really red, like a
Yeah,
reddish orange cover.
it's red.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, what'd you say, Tony? Where was Kicks from? Baltimore, right? Like the Maryland.
Baltimore, Hagerstown, that
Yeah,
Yeah,
area.
so I
Yeah.
think Kicks sort of like almost on the border of like They were Kicks would sometimes come, I think, into Pennsylvania, like the Harrisburg area and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
like that.
they toured for years before. I mean, they were the shoes before they were kicks, so they
Yeah,
did a lot
so
of touring.
Harpo was from a town called Selinsgrove, which is southwest of Wilkes-Barre. But they were a band that by the time I turned 21 in 1991, but you used to be able to go and occasionally see bands in the summer. Churches used to have what were called bazaars. I don't know if you guys know what this is. It's basically a church would have a bazaar, which was they'd sell food. You could play bingo, and they had these bingo card things that you could buy for a quarter. And they'd have bands, and most of the times it was cover bands, but every now and then you could find a cool local band. I don't remember hearing Harpo there, but when I turned 21, they were still kicking around. They had released another record in 93 called Too Much Is Just Enough. These were all self-released. They were on a label called Atlas Records, which I'm assuming was their own record label because it only has their stuff on it. But they used to mix, they would throw in some covers into their set because, again, the area that I lived in was, you almost had to do that. There was nobody that I could think of at that time that played just strictly originals. And there weren't a lot of bands from that area that had any kind of success. There was this band called The Boys that had a hit called Timothy, which was a song about these people, these miners who got mine collapsed on them, and they like was like they had to eat each other or something weird like
Cannibalism.
that. But it's
Yeah.
just really like Timothy, oh Timothy, it's like from the early. That was before my time, so I didn't know that band. But if you're maybe 5 or 7 years older than me, that would be the band that people would probably mention that they had sort of this song that was on the radio. But Harpo was a band that you could see them in the local clubs that pretty much only had cover bands. Uh, and by the time I started seeing them, they weren't quite as popular as they used to be, but they could still draw a couple hundred people, and you would go see them. And I remember they would the one lead singer also played keyboards, and he had the high pitched voice. So they would cover stuff like one of their big covers was Cashmere. This was like a highlight of their set. They always played Cashmere. They would play Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be. I remember them doing that. That was like one they did a lot. And then the bass player also sang, but he had the more gritty, like rough type voice. And like I mentioned, one of their album in the 90s, Too Much Is Just Enough, what was the name of the record. I'm pretty sure that was also, yeah, that was there was a song, Too Much Is Just Enough.
Yeah.
And he would always, let me tell you, when it comes to Harpo, too much is never enough. And then they'd, go into like, boom, dun, 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 dun. They were like that kind of, straight heat, boom, 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 boom on the bass and
Yeah,
like the AC/DC style guitar chords. And he usually wore like this, like one of those cowboy hats, kind of like Lemmy's thing that sort of folded over on this side.
Yeah.
And, the microphone would be kind of low and they were loud. And I remember seeing them, and there was this place called Market Street Square, which was a old train station. And they had two big rooms. There was a big room and a medium-sized room, and they would often have bands going in both rooms at the same time. And I remember seeing Harpo. They were in the smaller room, and they were pretty pissed off about it that they should have been in the bigger room. And the bass player was sort of commenting through the night. There was, I think, a Doors tribute band in the other room, and he was, kind of yelling at this tribute band the whole night. And so he
Oh
was in a
man.
bad mood from the word go. And about halfway through the show, some guy came into the room and he was pushing this cart that had like he was selling peanuts. It had like this looked like a popcorn machine thing, but it had peanuts inside it. And he just went completely ballistic on this guy. Get that peanut machine out of here before I jump off the stage and kick your head. Blah, 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 blah. This is a rock show. When we used to play in that other room, we'd have 5,000 people with it. I mean, he was just totally angry that not only were they not in the big room, but some guy, and he was dressed up like a carnival guy with a hat on and stuff, rolled into the room with a peanut, selling bags of
Real life
peanuts.
Spinal Tap.
Yeah, and it just pushed him over the edge. He couldn't
Just
take it.
pin up frustration of just not making it, just all exploded at once.
Yeah, that dude with the carnival hat and the peanuts, just that was the breaking point for this guy. And I think that they had here's another thing back then, which is something that you can sort of forget in this day and age, where everybody and their grandmother has a record out, right, or has recorded music. Back then, it was really difficult to
Hmm.
record music. You had to have a lot of money to get anything of any kind of quality. I mean, you're talking five, $10,000 just to go into a studio to record in the early 80s. And it was a real mysterious thing. Like I remember not it's such like, man, how do you do this? And like I mentioned, Harpo was from this town called Selinsgrove, and anybody who watches my channel, you probably heard me talk about how important college radio was to me growing up. Well, there was a radio station out of Selinsgrove, WQSU, that used to have metal shows at night that I used to listen to. And they used to play Harpo on there. So by the time I was old enough to go see Harpo, I kind of knew who they were and had heard them. And their big song that if anybody from the area is out there watching, you might recognize from them. It was called Gas House Alley Rock, and they always sort of ended their shows. That was like their encore number, Gas House Alley Rock, Gas House Alley Rock, you just can't stop. It was like that kind of hard rock and type of thing. And I think that they had some success out of the area. Like I think that they were able to go into, I just have some memory of hearing an interview with them where they talked about how they could go to Canada. There were like some towns in Canada that they could actually go to and have some success. But yeah, they're definitely that band that if you're from that area, they could play in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Harrisburg, that sort of central PA area. You mentioned Butch. They probably made it down to Allentown, maybe opening up for some bigger bands. But all right, we got Mike here with us to share his hometown hero that never got big. So who do you got, Mike?
Yeah, well, I'm from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and luckily we've got a very rich metal history here and a very rich punk history too. So when it comes to hometown heroes, we've got quite the plethora to choose from. So, but what I'm going to go with is, we had kind of talked that, anybody from the area, if you mention this name, everybody would be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, definitely remember them. Yeah, they were great." So the band I'm going to go with is Screamer, and they
Oh
released
wow.
one album, Target Earth, and they were one of the original signees on the New Renaissance label. Now you've probably heard stories about that label in the early days and
Yeah.
whether they did or did not kind of fulfill obligations that they had with their bands, but we don't really need to go into that. But so a little background with Screamer is Ronnie Vallejo, who was the one of the lead guitar players in the band. Him and his brother Len owned the hub of Kenosha, which was Grand Central Records and Tapes. And that's where you went to find any metal album that you wanted, and Lenny
Okay.
could order you anything. And that's where we got all of our imports. And that was the gateway to all of the extreme things, is where we discovered Venom and everything else. But so anyway, Ron played guitar in Screamer, worked at the store, and he's just a local legend. So, they kind of went hand in hand. And, as us being 14, 15, hanging out in the record store and talking to Ron, and then we would go we would see every show Screamer put on the weekends. And they were absolute legends. If you're not familiar with Screamer, they're right up there with Queensryche, and Ron was a huge Queensryche fan, so that kind of bled
Uh,
through. So, a little progressive, a little on the power side, but Screamer played every local venue in Kenosha. They spread north to Milwaukee. They would play in Chicago. They were perennial openers for a lot of the bigger headliners that came through, and they were poised for big stuff. So when New Renaissance signed them, they thought, okay, this is our stepping stone to the
Yeah.
bigger and better things. Unfortunately, as I kind of said before, New Renaissance didn't really fulfill their end of the deal, and things really kind of fell flat. And beside, this is it. This is what we got, and
Yeah.
they were never able to capitalize on that at all. So Target Earth it's a fantastic album. If you haven't heard it, seek it out. If you, especially if you're a fan of Queensryche or just early progressive metal, this is in your wheelhouse for sure.
Yeah, I have a copy of it. I'm looking at my Discogs now, and I've got it. And as I'm looking at Discogs, somebody has a review down below, and they say the obvious Jeff Tate influence can be a little overbearing at times.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I don't quite remember it, but I know I've got this, and I didn't realize they were from Wisconsin. They're from Kenosha.
yeah, yep. So
Okay.
we unfortunately we lost Ron almost a year ago now. He passed away last year,
Oh,
and that was a big shock to everybody in the older Kenosha scene. But yeah, and I've uploaded some really old footage of Screamer from back in the day on YouTube, and they did a couple of the cable access shows in the area. One of them's a lip sync, one of them is live, but luckily there is quite a bit of footage out there, and I know that the Target Earth is online. And then they actually did put out another album. Um, Geez, this is probably back in 2000. If you've got Discogs up, I don't
yeah,
even
I've
know if
got
they
it
have it
open.
lit.
What excites you?
Yeah, what
2008.
2008. Yeah, and that was a reunion album of sorts.
Looks
Um,
like it might have been on their own label or something.
it
It
was,
says as
yeah,
not on label, so it must have been a
yeah.
like a
It was a
self-release.
self. It was a self-released, yeah. And they were hoping maybe that would kind of relaunch the band a little bit, maybe stir up a little bit of interest, but it really didn't get too far outside of, the city limits. But it was fun to see the guys playing again. But yeah, Screamer is one of those bands around Kenosha that's held in high regard, and unfortunately, they're in that file of almost made it.
Yeah. Well, we talked about how back then in the 80s, really before the internet, just to make a record was a big, big deal.
Oh, absolutely.
You had to have money to do that.
Yeah,
You had to have resources. I mean, so because of that, it really you didn't have people going in and spending $10,000 in a
right.
studio unless they kind of had something going on.
Yeah,
So back then it was like a big deal if you were a local band and if you were had a record out, if you were signed to any kind of a label, because again, before the internet, it was such a mystery of like,
yeah,
how do you go about doing this? How do you get people to recognize? It's one thing if you're a Hollywood band or
right,
something like
right.
that, but when you're in a somewhere middle America or like, I picked this band called Harpo, which was from the Wilkes-Barre, Scranton,
Okay.
Pennsylvania area, and they were never signed to a label, but because it was really they like just released their own stuff, but that was like a big thing. Like, oh wow, they like have their
Yeah,
own record. That's because it took a lot of money and to print copies of it back then. It was
sure.
really a thing. It's not like today where everybody with a computer can record themselves and do it. So
Yeah. Yeah, you can basically record and print an album in your own bedroom these days. Everything's right at your fingertips. But you're absolutely right. It was a process back then, and to be able to get yourself in front of the right people was a huge undertaking. Now it's just you can send a file to a million people in a
yeah,
nanosecond and hope for the best. But yeah, it was a different time and it was a different procedure, and you had to be in the right place at the right time. Plus, I think there's something to be said too that labels at some point, even at like the underground labels that like you and I are used to talking about, would actually try to grow their bands. You know, they may sign a band, but they weren't disposable right away. You know, they put an album out, and if they still had the budget, you know, they would kind
Yeah.
of grow them a little bit, put another one out, and they stuck with them a little bit longer than things are nowadays. Everything's flavor of the second these days.
Yeah, and if
But
it doesn't, the labels sort of expect you to do all the demoing and finding your sound
yeah,
and all that. Whereas labels, especially in the 70s, they used to be really tolerant. You think about the first couple Thin Lizzy records, first couple UFO records, it was almost
absolutely.
expected like that you weren't really gonna even start to pick up traction until your maybe third record.
Yeah.
That was usually kind of when the record label was like, okay, now it's time to start
Yep.
you guys to start doing something. They gave you an album or two to just kind of find your sound. And you think about how
Yeah.
many bands, the Scorpions, their first record, there's so
Yeah.
many bands where like they're from that era where their first one or two records, Deep Purple, the first three Deep Purple records
Right.
don't sound
Yeah.
like,
First
bands
couple of
just,
UFO albums were all
yeah,
spaced out. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, they
exactly.
don't it's just not like that anymore. Yeah, like you said, you know, you would be able to farm out a couple of albums just to get your footing and find your sound and your style, and then you could move forward. But you know, it's even releasing an album these days, it's more or less, you know, they release a single or two every few months, it seems, and that suffices in place of a full album. But
Yeah, yeah.
so
Are there any bands? We also talked about bands that did go on to big success from the areas that we live in, like from Wilkes-Barre. Breaking Benjamin is
mhm.
from Wilkes-Barre. So, is there any bands from Kenosha that broke really big?
Nothing that I can think of. I can give you a bunch of them that were very, very close. If we go a little further north to Milwaukee, you know, as far as metal goes, Realm was from Milwaukee, and they
Okay.
made some waves on the Roadrunner label. You go a little further south down into northern Illinois and Chicago. Wrath is from around here, which involved a couple guys from southeast Wisconsin, and they were on the Restless label. And Nothing to Fear, if I remember correctly, was produced by Ronnie Montrose, actually.
Wow.
So, and they had some pretty high profile opening gigs and small tours and things like that. But um, if you want to talk outside of strictly metal and hard rock, the Violent Femmes were from Milwaukee.
Oh,
So, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and you know, they're pretty much, you know, known worldwide. They're a little bit more on
Oh, yeah.
the alternative, but you know, Di Kreutzen is from Wisconsin, and you know, I could go on and on. If you want to talk punk, you know, that might be a little bit more of a niche for some people to realize some of the names. But we've had quite a few very famous punk and hardcore bands from the area too.
Yeah. Nice.
So, yeah, yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, there you go. There's Mike's contribution to this dudes episode, Screamer. All right. We'll head back to the other dudes.
All right. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, that was the band from there. We did have the band to come out of Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Do any of you guys know they're a very, very big alternative rock band that came out of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton area. Do you know who that band is?
You gonna say the Armadillos?
Nope. No, I'm talking these guys are huge now. They play hockey arenas.
Oh shit.
What
Breaking
was it?
Benjamin.
Weezer? Oh, I
Breaking
was going to say
Benjamin was
Weezer.
Yeah, Breaking Benjamin was from the Wilkes-Barre was from Wilkes-Barre. And I remember seeing them like right before I moved out of there. They were doing a mixture of covers and originals, and they were starting to get popular. And I remember I moved out of the area and I came back like a year later, and they had some independent CD that was getting played on the local mainstream radio station, and they were playing to like, 800 people. And I thought, wow, man, these guys, they were like right at that when Tool was kind of breaking big, and they
Hmm.
had that kind of, his voice had that kind of sound to it. They used to cover a lot of Tool songs. Them and the other band, not too far from Allentown, actually from the Harrisburg area, was a Hailstorm. Hailstorm came
Oh, I
from,
didn't know that they were from
yeah, they're
that
from
area.
Harrisburg. And I don't know if Butch, if you remember that magazine, Musician. It was like a
Yeah,
free
yeah.
paper magazine thing. They used to take out ads all the time in there, and their thing was that it was Lizzie and her brother, and they were, I mean, I'm talking like Lizzie was like 13 years old, and her brother was like 9 or something, and that was like their thing, like these young brother and sister in this band, and they played for I don't know how long before they broke big, but you know, you used to see them in the PA Musician magazine, and they played in sort of that Harrisburg area and everything. So
Lizzie took vocal lessons from Steve Whiteman from
yeah,
Kiss.
which that's why I asked you. I knew that Kicks, where they were in Maryland, I think was near that sort of Harrisburg, York, where sort of Pennsylvania is close to Maryland there. So yeah, she was from up in that area, and so yeah, it makes sense that he would have been, you know, somebody she would have had access to. So.
Yeah.
All right, well, there you go. There's some bands from our local scenes that never broke big, but that were huge in our hometowns. We're gonna splice in Mike here. He'll have his. I'm sure I already spliced him in here. So let us know if you've heard of the bands that we talked about, and let us know who that band is for your local scene. Let us know where you're
Definitely.
from, and let us know who that band is who everybody in your town would know them if you brought them up. Let us know in the comments down below. Let us know if you've heard of our bands, and we'll see you at the next Dudes Talking Metal.